So in this video, I want to introduce you to spreadsheets. Now, as part of the numerical methods exam, although you don't have access to a computer, you may get asked questions on spreadsheets, and that may well include an extract from a spreadsheet, in which case you might need to write down what the formula needs to be to go into a particular cell. Or you might need to find an error in a formula that they have suggested. So you need to have an understanding of spreadsheets and how they work. And I think it's very important that as part of this that you learn spreadsheets as well, because I use spreadsheets near daily as part of my job as a teacher, and spreadsheets get used so much outside the classroom. It's a really worthwhile skill to have. So let's begin. Now I'm going to come at this from a real basics viewpoint, as if you've not used or seen a spreadsheet before. Okay, so what you have is all of these what we call cells, and each one has a particular grid reference. So this is A4. You can see the grid reference in the top left corner here. Now I'm using Google Sheets. Another spreadsheet that you can use is Microsoft Excel. They work in very similar ways, okay, with nearly identical formulae. So it doesn't really matter if I'm using Google Sheets or Excel here. So let's say, for example, that I want to type the number 12 into this cell, and I'm going to type the number 7 into that cell. Okay. Now, all I've done there is you can either type 12 and then press return, which gets you into the cell below it, or you can type 12 and then I'm pressing the right arrow key, and that puts me into the next box to the right. Okay. So a couple of different ways of doing that. So let's say I wanted to take my value from cell A2, which is this one, and take away cell B2, which is that one. Any formula begins with an equals sign. So equals. And what you'll see is the formula box here will also show the formula that you're typing, as well as what you're typing inside the cell. Okay. Now, if I wanted to get cell A2, you could just type A2. You could write that as lowercase or uppercase. What's useful about what Google Sheets does is that it actually tells you what it highlights the cell. Excel will do this as well, but it highlights the cell and also gives you a little value at the top there as well, which is useful. You don't have to type it. What you can do is just select the cell with your mouse and go, okay, I've selected cell A2, and then I want to maybe subtract cell B2. Okay, press equals, and you get a 5, of course. So 12 take away 7 is 5. Now, as I was putting that together, you'll notice that in some cases, Google Sheets started suggesting some things that I might like to use. And it does this throughout, sometimes bringing up a little catalogue of options for me, which is really useful. So let's say, for example, I wanted to have a formula that found the maximum value of what's in cell A2 and cell B2. Now, let's say I don't know what that formula is, but if I start typing equals and then let's try maximum, well, what actually happens is that it says, oh, well, max is actually a formula in the catalogue, and it says maximum value in a numerical data set. That's what I want. So if I open bracket, and then there are two ways of doing this. I can either do A2, comma, B2, close bracket. So this will find me the maximum value of those two cells, which of course is 12. Or I can use a slightly different way of doing it, which is if I select A2 and drag it to B2, what has happened is that Google Sheets has automatically typed in A2 colon B2. Now, what that's doing is it's looking at all the cells from A2 to B2 in a line inclusive, and then finding the maximum value. Now, because there's only 2 cells, it seems a little bit redundant, but let's say I had a few more cells. Okay, so what I could do is I could go maximum value of. Now I could do A4, comma B4, comma C4, etc. Or I could do this. Okay, and that's much quicker. So it's useful to have that feature. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is an if statement. Okay, so let's say we call this value x and this value y. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just center those. Okay, and let's say I wanted to have a statement appear that said that x was bigger, if x is bigger, or y is bigger, if y is bigger. Okay, so one way that I could do that is through an if statement. And an if statement starts with, well, equals, because it's a formula, and then if. Okay, so then you open bracket and you say, okay, well, if this cell is greater than this cell. Okay, so the first thing that you type in is if this should happen. Okay, and then the comma separates out the pieces within the formula. So if that is to happen, then what I wanted to say is that x is bigger. Now, in order to type a string of words, then that needs to be in inverted commas, like so, inverted double commas. And then you could say x is bigger. Okay, and then you have a comma to write in, well, what's the alternative? Now, if I was to close the bracket here, then what that means is that it would just say x is bigger if x is bigger. Alternatively, if it wasn't, it would be blank. Okay, so let's just see that working. So currently it says x is bigger because x is bigger. If I change this to 5, then the cell has disappeared, okay? Because I told it to replace it with nothing and leave it blank if it wasn't. If I instead wanted the reply to be, okay, well, if x is not bigger, then y is bigger, then in inverted commas, y. Actually, let's type it in here. So it's bigger for you. So y is bigger. Okay, so now if I change x to 5, it now says y is bigger. Okay, so this is one of the useful features of using if statements, which you need to be able to work with. So structurally, as you can see, okay, it starts with the formula part, okay, and then comma, what happens, what you want to happen if it is true, and what you want to happen if it is false. Okay, so what you could say is you go, well, you could instead have true and then false if you wanted it to write that. Okay, so I've got a bit of a challenge for you now. So here are some potential formulae with using these numbers here. So from cell A1 to A5, okay? And what I'd like you to do is just pause the video here, and I'd like you to read down that list and go, right, if each of these were formulae, what would it calculate? Okay, so have a go, and then press play when you're ready. Now, it may well be that some of these things you don't recognize, which is perfectly fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these and just see what happens. So, first one, A2 plus A3. Now, it doesn't become a formula until I put an equal sign at the beginning, okay? So, what do we think is going to happen here? Well, what it should do is it should add cell A2 and A3 together. And that gets us 37, okay? Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these over here, make that a little bit wider, and just turn them to equals here. Okay, so we get 37 there. Now, the second one, max, open bracket, A2, comma, A3, comma, A4. So what that's going to do is it's going to find me the maximum value in cells A2, A3, and A4, which should be 21. So if I put an equal sign there, 21. Okay. The next one, sum, open bracket, A1, colon, A5. This should find me the sum from cells A1 to A5. So adds those 5 numbers together, and we get 75. The next one, SQRT of A5. That means the square root of A5. Now, A5 is 9, so we should get 3. Okay. Now, the next one, STDEV. So if you didn't spot that one, that is the standard deviation of A1 to A5. So STDEV. And I don't know what that's going to be off the top of my head. Let's find out. Press equals. And we get 4.6368, etc. Now, the next one, if, open bracket, A2 is greater than A3, comma A4, comma A5. So, from our knowledge of if statements, what this is asking is if A2 is greater than A3, so if 16 is greater than 21, which it isn't, if it's true, write down A4, which is 17. If it's not true, write down A5, which is 9. So it's not true, so it should just give us 9. Oh, there we go. Now, as for this one, log, open bracket, A2, comma 2. Now what that's doing is it's going to find the logarithm base 2 of the number in cell A2, which is 16. So log base 2 of 16, 2, 4, 8, 16. So it should be 4, shouldn't it? So press equals, and we get 4. Then we've got 2, and this upwards arrow A5, that is 2 to the power of the number in A5. So 2 to the power of 9 is 512. Now, what's this one? Floor, open bracket, A1 times PI, open bracket, close bracket, then close bracket again. Now, first of all, PI, open bracket, close bracket, gives you pi. So if you do equals and then pi, okay, if you just press return on Google Sheets, it then comes up and forces you to put a bracket in. So we write equals pi, close, open bracket, close bracket, and that gets us our value. So what is this doing? Well, you're multiplying A1 by pi, that's what the star means, and then you're finding the floor of that. So the floor function rounds the number down to the nearest integer. Okay, so we're going to multiply 12 by pi. So let's do A1 times pi. It's already suggesting all these. I don't want those. So that's 37.6999, 6991184, sorry. And we want to floor that, so that should give us 37. Okay. Let's get rid of that for the time being. Now the next one, sum if A1 dot, colon A5, and then in inverted commas greater than 13. So sum if is an if statement that allows you to go, right, sum if, so add these numbers together, so add A1 to A5 together if they're greater than 13. So it selects the numbers that are greater than 13 and adds those together. So that should be 16 plus 21 plus 17, which is equal to 54. And the last one here is exp of A5. Now what exp is e to the x. So this is the exponential function. So this is going to find you e to the power of 9, which is 8,103.08, etc. Okay, so now what I've done is I've got a table of values. So these are the values of n, and these are the values of un. Now, these UNs are generated using this equation. So un is equal to n squared, take away 2n plus 4. My question to you is, what would the formula need to be in cell C2? So in cell C2, what is that formula? Okay, so you might want to try writing it down now. So pause the video, have a go. Right, okay, so let's assume that's done. So what is the formula there? Well, it would need to start with an equals, okay? And then you would need to be squaring the n, which is the value in C1. Okay, so we need C1 squared. So then we are using the number on my keyboard above a 6, so that little hat to be to the power of. So squared, take away 2, and then the times symbol, which is that star, which on my keyboard is above the 8. And then I want to select C1 again, plus 4, and that gets me 4, which is the value I'm trying to find. So here's another example, and this equation is un is equal to log base 10 of 3n squared. So again, my question is, what formula needs to go into cell C2? So if you've had a go at that, what would we need? Well, we would need equals, then log, you can do lowercase if you like, then open bracket. Now we need 3n squared, so 3 times cell C1 squared. Now we want to say that we want base 10, so comma 10, close bracket, and that gets us our value. So here is the formula that we needed to get there. Okay, so here's the next one. So this one's a little bit more challenging. We have un is equal to the square root of un minus 1 plus 3n, where u1 is equal to 1. So the question is, what needs to go into cell C2? So what does the formula need to be? So pause the video, have a little think, try it out. Okay, so because the formula has un minus 1 and 3n in it, okay, there are two little things going on here. So first of all, in cell B2 is just the number 1. Okay, so in cell C2 will be equal to the square root, so SQRT, or in capitals, whichever, open bracket. Now we need un minus 1. So un minus 1, if this is u2, un minus 1 is u1. So I need that value, so cell B2, plus 3 lots of n, which is C1. Then close the bracket. Okay, so pressing equals, or return, rather, gets us the 2.6457. So with that formula in there, all I then needed to do to generate the other ones, which I will show you in a moment, again, is I could go down to the bottom right of this box and then drag it along, and then it gives me all the other values. So if I get rid of those, it knows how to replicate that formula so that the next one, you can see, is C2, square root of C2 plus 3 lots of D1. And the next one is the square root of D2 plus 3 lots of E1. And the next one is square root of E2 plus 3 lots of F1. Okay, so it knows to replicate the formula along the row as far as I've dragged it. So in this example, I want us to try un is equal to sine of 2 to the n, and I want you to force the spreadsheet to write its answers to 1 decimal place. Okay, so what formula should go into cell C2 to allow this to happen? So you might want to pause the video, have a go, see if you can figure it out. Okay, so let's have a go ourselves. So equals, to start a formula, then the formula for rounding to 1 decimal place starts with round. So round, open bracket. Now we need sine, so sine of, now 2 to the n, so 2 to the power of C1, close bracket, and then comma, because I want 1 decimal place, press it 1, and we get the minus 0.8. So in this one, we've got un is equal to 1 over, open brackets, 8n all cubed. And I want you to think, what should the formula need to be in C2, in cell C2? Okay, so pause the video, have a go, and let's see what we come up with. Okay, so what we're going to need is equals, then 1, and then we need backslash here. Okay, so that's 1 over. And I'm going to open up a couple of brackets so that I can have 8 times n, close brackets, and then cubed, close brackets. Now, you wouldn't really need those secondary brackets there, but I think it's safer to do so. Then equals, and then we get our value. Now, you may find that actually these are giving you too many decimal places, and you don't like that. So on Google Sheets, there is a button up here to decrease the decimal places. And if you press it, it puts them all in line, and then you can go right however many decimal places you want. Okay, and that's quite useful for what it's showing you, to reduce the numbers down so it's not so much there on the screen. So another way it could write it is if I go up to Format, and I go to Number, and I go to Scientific, it could write it like this, and I could add some more decimal places there if I like. Okay, now what does that mean? What do these E's mean? Well, the way that it writes it is that this is a way of writing standard form. So rather than writing times 10 to the minus 3, it writes it as capital E minus 3. Okay, so this is saying 1.9531 times 10 to the minus 3. Okay, that's what that E, and then minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, etc. That's what it means. So I already briefly showed you this idea of dragging one of the cells and reproducing the formula. I'm going to show you another example of that now. So let's say I just wanted to multiply all these numbers by 10. So what I could do is I could go, right, well, if I do equals A1 times by 10, okay. Now, one of the things that Google Sheets does is it suggests autofilling. So it kind of thinks, well, maybe you want all those numbers multiplied by 10, okay? So it does have that offer, but I don't want that just now. So I'm going to reject that. And instead, I'm going to go up to the cell, and I'm going to go to the bottom right-hand corner, and my cursor turns to this little cross, and that allows me to drag, if I click and hold it, and drag that down to as far as I want it to go. And what it does is it replicates the formula. So the original formula, of course, was A1 times 10. So what it's placed in B2 is A2 times 10. And in B3, A3 times 10, then A4 times 10, and then A5 times 10. So it's replicated the formula down, going, right, you clearly want the cell to the left times by 10, and then it's dragged that formula down. Okay, I'm going to show you something else here. So I'm going to insert another row, just like essentially moves everything up for me, or down if you like. Then I'm going to put the number 10 in here, okay? So let's say I change my formula in here to A2, and then I'm going to times it by C1. Okay, so let's say I want to still multiply all my numbers from A2 to A6 by 10. And I've said, okay, well, I've got the number 10 in C1, so I'm going to do A2 times C1, press return, and then I'm going to drag these down, thinking, okay, each of these will now repeat that formula, and it will multiply A2 by C1 and A3 by C1, A4 by C1, etc. Oh. Now, one thing that's happened here is that it's written this in a strange way. So that's still 0. It's written in standard form for some reason. Let me just change that. Just go up to format and just change it to... maybe I don't want it just as number. Well, that's automatic. Plain text. There we go. Let's keep it as that. But this didn't work. Now, why didn't it work? What has happened here? It seems like I'm getting zeros for some reason. So the reason why this didn't work was because if I go into the formula for this cell, this has gone, well, it's A3 times C2, right? It's replicated the positioning of the cells. So in here, it's going, right, you want to multiply the cell to immediately to the left and the one immediately top right of it. Okay? So it's trying to do the same with the next one. A3 is the one to the left, C2 is the one to the top right. Okay? So it's actually multiplying 16 by 0. Okay? And all of these have multiplied the one to the left to the top right. Okay, so that's not what I wanted, was it? So what I really need is a way of locking C1 in position. So going, right, actually, I just want you to always focus on C1 as part of that calculation. So the way that you do that is using dollar signs. So I'm going to go up to my formula in B2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a dollar sign to the left of C1, okay? So I'm just going to place that there. Now let's see what happens. Let's drag them down again. Now, strangely, that hasn't worked, okay? Everything still seems to be the same. And it's also put that in as well, which I definitely don't want. So let's go up to format. Let's change it to plain text again. Okay. So that didn't work. Now, the reason why it didn't work is because what that's doing is it's locking column C, but it's not locking the cell number. Okay. So it's saying, right, I definitely want it from column C to stick, but the one can change. So if I go here, you can see that the number is changing, but this isn't. Okay, so that's locked the column, but not the row. So what you do is you go, okay, well, actually, I need to place a dollar sign to the left of the 1. And then when I drag this down, so you can see if I go into cell B3, I've got A3 times C1. Then B4 is A4 times C1. So it locks that cell in position, having the dollar sign to the left of the C to lock the column, and the dollar sign to the left of the 1 to lock the 1. Okay. Now, if I just had the dollar sign to the left of the 1, okay, well, that works as well in this context. Okay, it does the job because although because you're dragging the cells downwards and you're always looking in cell C anyway, it doesn't really matter. So you could not have the dollar sign to the left of the C. Okay, but if you were dragging it to the right, then and you didn't want the column to change, then you would have to put a dollar sign to the left of the column. So that about wraps up what I want to show you with spreadsheets. It's useful if you just really have a play around now and again in readiness for the exam, so that you know how these formulae work, how spreadsheets behave, so that you can answer those questions about what formula needs to go in a particular cell, what is incorrect about the formula that has been given to you in the exam, and everything along those lines. Okay, so do a little bit of practice, have a little play around, so that you understand how it works.